opponents down. Double down. Look at them fall.
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Deicide, and in this video, we're gonna go ahead and discuss how to play on the Warlock, and more specifically, how to play on the Dawnblade subclass. Now, many of you have been asking me, why are you playing so much on the Dawnblade subclass? Or when is the Dawnblade subclass guide gonna come out? Well, for you, my friends, this video is made just for you, and the reason why it took me so long to make is because I really wanted to understand and grasp as to how this new Dawnblade subclass was functioning in Destiny 2. There are a ton of brand new unique abilities that can only be found on this subclass, and so I really want to try out all of them to make sure that I understood how to play this thing. But then in addition to that, I also wanted to note all the comparisons and the contrasts from Destiny 1 and that Sunsinger subclass to Destiny 2 and this Dawnblade subclass. Not only are we going to discuss exactly those differences, but we're going to discuss exactly how to play this subclass so that whenever you guys want to use it, you'll be able to take this thing into the Crucible and the PvP and absolutely demolish and incinerate just about any guardian that you see. The only thing left to do is to eviscerate that subscribe button, and let's jump right into the video. One of the most important characteristics, regardless of whatever kind of subclass or character that you guys happen to be using, is you have to understand how that character and its subclass's abilities work in terms of maneuverability. Being able to outwit your opponent this way or that way all comes down to maneuverability, and on the Warlock and the Dawnblade subclass, that comes down to either Balance Glide, Control Glide, or Focused Burst. With Balance Glide, this is a jump ability that provides bonuses to both speed and initial control, while we also have the option of choosing between Control Glide, and that's a jump ability that provides better directional control in the air. And the last thing that we have here is called Focus Burst, and Focus Burst is another jump ability that provides an initial burst of speed. With all three of these things, I personally use the one that's called Focus Burst, and that's because I find that having that initial burst of speed not only allows me to get into the air faster, but on the Dawnblade subclass, that is absolutely essential because you have many abilities that provide you with bonuses while you're in the air. We're going to discuss all those things in just a little bit, but I also want to note that with Focus Burst, you can actually do somewhat of like a Warlock Glide. Even though it's not nearly as good as what it was back in Destiny 1, you can still get that initial burst of momentum to carry you forward and cover larger horizontal distances much better than what you could with the Balance Glide or the Control Glide. However, what you can also use is that Control Glide because that gives you better directional control in the air, and that's phenomenal and spectacular for going around corners and for hovering into the air around these hallways or other types of archways, as that's really going to come into play to try and break line of sight. That is then going to give you the advantage to make sure that you get that Guardian while you're still in the air. If you had to choose between one of these three abilities, either go with Focus Burst or Control Glide for the reasons that I just stated, and choose whichever one fits your personal preference and your playstyle the best. A very powerful ability that can be found on every single Warlock subclass is the Healing or the Empowering Rift. A Healing Rift summons a Will of Light that continuously heals those inside of it. An Empowering Rift summons a Will of Light, but in this case, it increases the attack power of those inside of it. So with an Empowering Rift, I find that whenever I use that, I'm never actually doing enough damage, and the reason is because it still takes the exact same number of bullets with an Empowering Rift that it does without an Empowering Rift, and that's because it doesn't do enough of a damage buff to kill Guardians within less bullets. For this reason and for this reason alone, the Healing Rift is by all means the best way to go here, and that's because I cannot tell you to how many times that I gain an additional health bonus, but at the exact same time, I also gain an overshield as long as I'm staying inside that Healing Rift. When you couple along not just your overshield, but having your teammates overshield as well due to this Healing Rift, is truly spectacular and marvelous because it doesn't just help yourself out, but it also helps out your entire team, and being a team player is what ultimately wins you a lot of these engagements just because this game is so focused around team shotting and having more health. Now, the way in which you use a Healing Rift is very situational, and the way in which I want you to use this is to anticipate in which you're going to get into an engagement. Never ever pop your Healing Rift after you've already gotten into an engagement, because most likely, if you do happen to summon your Healing Rift, the odds of you being able to use it are very null, because as soon as you happen to do summon it, then you're most likely going to instantaneously die, and then you wasted your entire Healing Rift and it's not going to help anybody at all. That's why before you get into engagement, pop your Healing Rift around a corner and then make sure that it's half around the corner and half behind the corner, so that this way you're able to stay inside the Healing Rift while you're in and out of cover at the exact same time, being able to continuously regenerate your health 24/7. In these types of engagements, you were able to easily do a bait and switch maneuver with your opponent, while at the exact same time, you guys are almost never ever losing health, and that Guardian or 2 Guardians or even 3 Guardians are almost always going to get down just because your team shots with the Healing Rift are going to easily surpass those without the Healing Rift. On the Dawnblade subclass, we had the next huge topic to discuss, and that's the grenade abilities and how to use them. Each one of the grenade abilities found on this subclass are extremely unique, and they are very powerful, but they also have their very unique situations in which they can be applied, since they all have pros and cons that are drawbacks and gains for each individual grenade. The first one that we're going to discuss is called a solar grenade, and a solar grenade creates a flare of solar light which continuously damages enemies for a moderate damage output. The wonderful thing about this grenade is that as soon as you toss it onto a ceiling or onto the ground or even onto a wall, you're going to get that instantaneous damage output with a radial effect on every single Guardian who happens to be standing inside that grenade. The one downside to this is that as soon as they go outside that grenade, the effect no longer takes into account, and so that grenade is kind of null and void, and you're only doing a moderate amount of damage. But the good news is that the solar grenade is very powerful in holding down control areas. Even if you don't want to actually damage any Guardians, you can prevent them from walking through a passageway or a doorway or something else like that, just because the fact that this solar grenade is going to stay there for a very long period of time. And sometimes that's by all means the most important thing, especially if you're playing in game modes like Survival or even that of Countdown, where you're trying to defend the bomb, and this one characteristic cannot be found on any other grenade in this Dawnblade subclass. The next grenade that we've got here is called a Firebolt grenade, and this unleashes a radial bolt of solar light at nearby enemies that can damage up to 4 enemies for a delayed damage output of approximately 90 points of damage on every single Guardian. In terms of how powerful that grenade can be, this is by far the most powerful grenade just because of the fact that it can do so much damage in a very short period of time. The one thing that you have to note about this Firebolt grenade is that it is not an instantaneous damage output, but rather it has a delayed effect. So what you have to do is you have to anticipate a Guardian coming around a corner via your radar or something else like that, or after you've already damaged them in that sense, and in that way you can go ahead and toss your grenade to either pre-damage them or to finish them off and use it however that you so see fit. The final grenade that we have on the Dawnblade subclass is called a Fusion Grenade, and this is an explosive grenade that causes massive damage whenever it's attached to targets. Now this massive damage output is actually not that great, and to be honest with you, of all 3 of these grenades, the Fusion Grenade is by all means the weakest. The reason why I say that it's the weakest is because you can't control an area and you can't damage more than 1 Guardian at a time, and for this reason and this reason alone, the Fusion Grenade is not nearly that good. These things got a massive nerf back from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, because back in Destiny 1, that's all you saw was fusion grenades because it was an instantaneous guaranteed kill. In this game where team shot is more important than anything else, using a fusion grenade to only damage 1 Guardian is not that beneficial to you, nor is it beneficial to your entire team, and so that's why I would highly recommend that you guys either use a solar grenade or a firebolt grenade depending on the situations and the game modes and your personal preference and playstyle. Now that you guys have a very basic understanding of how this general subclass functions, the next thing that we have got to discuss is how the advanced techniques of this entire subclass work based on the 2 skill trees and or subclass builds, one of which is called Attunement of the Flame and the other which is called Attunement of the Sky. Now the way in which each one of these functions is that they both have a very unique characteristic, and that each one of them has a maneuvering and or a dodging mechanism that is intrinsic to each one of the subclass skill trees. In addition to this, you have one entire skill tree that's focused around more gameplay style of movement, meaning that those types of perks are going to come into play while you're doing one gun battle engagement to the next. While inverse related to this, you also have the other skill tree, and that one's more focused around your super, while at the same time having that dodge ability that I just mentioned from before. So let me go ahead and discuss the Attunement of the Flame build first, and this is the one that I actually happen to use and the one that I prefer. The very first perk that we've got on this is called Icarus Dash, and Icarus Dash states that by pressing circle or B twice while in the air, you engage this subclass's unique dodging mechanism much the same way as the Twilight Garrison did back in Destiny 1 for all Titans. The The wonderful thing about this Icarus Dash ability is that you can use it every 10 seconds. Not just this, but you can use it to close the gap on Guardians, retreat from Guardians, or just simply use it as an evasive maneuver to go ahead and close the gap and cover more horizontal distances. The reason why it's so great is because it has a versatile maneuverability aspect, and it can be used in a wide variety of instances, but the hard key thing to understand this is when to use it and when not to. You have a cooldown every 10 seconds, and for this reason, you really have to use it based on your judgment and based on the way in which you prefer to use this ability. It's not something that you can spam, and you have to know the exact intrinsic moment in order for you to be able to pounce and capitalize on someone's mistake, or to be able to evade, or something else along those lines. If you ask me, this is by far the best ability in this entire subclass as a whole, and for that one reason, I use this subclass more often than not because it's such a beneficial thing to have. The next perk that we've got here is called Swift Strike, and Swift Strike states that striking an enemy with this melee ability will not only burn your target for a damage over time effect, but it also temporarily increases your movement as well as your reload speed. This is a marvelous ability in every way, shape, and form, especially for having on weapons that have kill clip. Whenever you have a weapon that has kill clip, that's going to drastically increase the reload speed on any of those weapons, and that's going to allow you to down more Guardians more frequently whenever you have one of those weapons equipped. At the exact same time, you're also going to increase your movement speed, and that is such a very underrated ability because getting from one direction to the next via just running is simply unheard of, and is so unbelievably important whenever you're playing competitive game modes like Countdown or Survival, because all those game modes incur one thing, and that is map positioning. With this ability, that's definitely going to give you that in addition to that marvelous reload speed. The next ability that we've got on this subclass build is called Winged Sun. And Winged Sun states that as you engage enemies mid-flight while aiming down your sights, you can also toss grenades while gliding. So the wonderful thing about this is that I find myself having to go over cover and then simply aim while in the air, showing myself for maybe 1 or 2 seconds to get a couple bullets off, and then retreating back into cover. I do this so many times that it's absolutely unheard of, as it allows you to have another element of surprise, and this simply cannot be done with any other subclass in this game. The last ability that we have within this Attunement of the Flame build is one that's called Heat Rises. And Heat Rises states that airborne kills recharge your grenade and your melee energy, and that casting Daybreak, aka your super, will instantaneously refill all your ability energy. This is another huge characteristic as to why I like to have on this subclass, is because whenever I'm proccing Winged Sun, I'm then most likely going to proc Heat Rises, and so you're almost proccing 2 abilities within the exact same maneuvering objective, and that is simply fantastic in every way, shape, and form. So when you combine Icarus Dash to give you a maneuvering ability to go left and right very quickly, and you combine that with Winged Sun, this subclass, it gives you the most versatile maneuverability out of any other subclass in the game except for Blink on the Voidwalker. Now that we know all the abilities on the Attunement of the Flame build, the next build that we have got to cover is the Attunement of Sky skill tree. The first perk that we have on this is one that's called Phoenix Dive, and Phoenix Dive states that by pressing circle or B twice while in the air, you quickly descend to the ground, restoring your health. In addition to this, the perk also states that while Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive causes explosive damage. So the wonderful thing about this is that you do an instantaneous dive whenever you're in the air, and that's always going to do one thing, and that is to regenerate your health. So it's very nice for you to go ahead and engage enemies while in the air, then go down directly to the ground, get behind cover, and get your health back to then re-engage against those enemies very quickly. The next ability that we've got is one that's called Igniting Touch, and Igniting Touch states that striking the enemy with this melee ability will burn your target for a damage over time effect and cause them to explode when killed. This is a great thing again, more for PvE rather than PvP, but once again, having that damage over time effect is absolutely fantastic, because what that does is it allows you to then target and track a Guardian if they happen to go behind cover, just because of the very simple fact that that damage output is still going to be increasing, and you can see that behind walls, and that's why it's so perfect. The next perk that we have on this skill tree build is one that's called Fated for the Flame, and Fated for the Flame states that Daybreak projectiles seek targets as they travel, and upon impact, launch a streak of deadly flames. This is a very nice ability here because it allows the super to have aim assistance on every single projectile that you shoot, and whenever you're getting aim assistance, that's always a plus. The final perk that we have on this subclass is one that's called Everlasting Fire, and Everlasting Fire states that killing an enemy with Daybreak extends its duration. So right here we can see that with Fated for the Flame and Everlasting Fire, both these two perks are going to come in handy back to back, but they only come in handy whenever you're using your super. And how often do we actually get our super? Once, maybe twice per game if we're lucky, and that's about it. So if we were to look at the Attunement of Sky skill tree and the Attunement of the Flame skill tree, I would say that the Attunement of the Flame skill tree is far more important and beneficial because you're going to be able to proc all those abilities for every single type of engagement that you're in, regardless of whether you're using your super or not. In contrast to this, you have the Attunement of the Sky skill tree, and you only have 2 abilities that you can use in continuous gameplay, whereas you have also 2 more abilities that can only be used for your super. Knowing these 2 key differences, I would highly recommend that you guys use the Attunement of the Flame skill tree because number 1, you're going to be able to use all those abilities throughout the entire gameplay of that game that you're in, and at the exact same time, you have Icarus Dash, which is on a cooldown every 10 seconds, and that maneuverability is simply phenomenal, exceptional, and stupendous beyond all measures. The very last thing that I want to say about the Dawnblade subclass is for you guys to understand and truly grasp how to use the super known as Daybreak. The Daybreak super on the Dawnblade subclass is by all means one of the most difficult supers for you to use in this entire game. The reason for this is because you have to anticipate where Guardians are going to be and not where Guardians are currently at. The way in which the super works is that you have to have a trajectory that follows via your Flaming Sword projectile, and then that projectile is going to follow that trajectory. Knowing this, you really have to anticipate where a Guardian's movement is going and then toss that Flaming Sword projectile based upon that movement. The number one thing that I would suggest for you guys to use is to number 1, pop it behind cover. As soon as you pop your super behind cover, I would then advise you guys to get into the air or to get into a close confined space according to where the enemy Guardians are at. If you need to, use Icarus Dash to help you with your maneuvering standpoint, as that can really close the gap and make sure that your projectiles are going to hit your targets every single time. Once you use the Icarus Dash, the next best thing for you to do is to anticipate and then toss your super accordingly, but make sure that you do it strategically. You can't just go ahead and spam your super, as that's going to instantaneously wipe your entire super and you may not get any kills. So that's why I would highly recommend that you guys pop your super behind cover, adjust your super based on the maneuvering standpoint, and then once you have that done, use it strategically so that you hit every single target based on the enemy Guardian's trajectory. With all these things being said, you guys now have a very solid and thorough understanding of this entire Dawnblade subclass. You know the grenades, the jumping abilities, the healing rift, as well as the subclass build in which I would use, and so for that, I would highly recommend that you try this exact same build, as I find it to be the most powerful subclass build on this particular subclass. If I had to say whether or not this subclass was in one of the top 3 subclasses of this entire game, I would certainly say yes. And that's because you have a maneuvering ability that is simply marvelous and spectacular and can be used every 10 seconds. When you couple along with this a grenade that can damage up to 4 Guardians and a healing rift on top of all of this stuff, this entire subclass is a monstrosity, but you have to know how to use it accordingly and properly and complement it very nice with the weapons that you so happen to use. Now let me know what you guys think about all this stuff down in the comment section below, and if you also happen to have some different tips for the Dawnblade subclass, then by all means, let me know what those are, as I'm very intrigued to hear what they are, as that's not only going to help me, but it's going to help everyone else too. Lastly, go ahead and check out some of my other new videos, as you guys can see right there on the screen. If you happen to enjoy this one, then you're definitely going to enjoy those as well. That's pretty much all I've got for you for right now, and so as always, DS Slayers, great gaming, until next time.